Hello and welcome to another edition of the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. Make sure you follow OTG on Twitter at OTGBasketball. Also hit that subscribe button. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me today, Chris Hines of the Greatness Podcast Network. What's up, Chris?
What's up, man? Ready to talk this NBA talk, man. It's a lot going on, nonstop content.
Yeah, it has been nonstop since yesterday. We even had some signings leaked early, but, we'll talk trades first. Obviously, Paul George has been on the trade market for a while now. He's finally moved to OKC for Victor Oladipo and Sabonis. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think Indiana could have got more? Were you surprised by this trade?
I wasn't surprised, and I think we kind of always say that you should get more for your star, but it's just not possible. Look at the DeMarcus Cousins trade. They didn't really get too much. Anytime you give up a star, you don't really get that value. You're going to get like maybe half, maybe 60 cents on a dollar, maybe. It's hard, it's hard to get equal value unless you get it in assets and draft picks, because it's harder to tell what that draft pick will be. But it's just complicated to see teams give up one big player for another big player. That really just doesn't happen too much in the NBA. Like, equal trades really don't happen. Somebody always gets fleeced, man. Always. Yeah. But I think Indiana's biggest issue is they waited a little too long.
100%.
And Boston turned down that trade. Oh my God! I think Boston should have made that move. That's what I think they'll be looking back on in hindsight. Like, wow, we should have got that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the point that they waited so long, there was a lot of rumors. It's hard to say. Like, there's trade offers that supposedly the Celtics sent that it would have been obvious for the Pacers to accept, but they didn't. So we'll see, if that's actually true. But it seems like the Pacers probably should have moved them at the deadline, and that's when they had the best deals. After that, especially when George says publicly that he was planning to go to L.A. in like 2018. Well, he didn't say it publicly, but it came out publicly that he was going to do that. The Pacers lost all leverage. So, and there was also talk about, the Pacers not wanting to put them in the East, and they wanted to send them West and just send them to OKC, and that, Kevin Pritchard just didn't want to deal with Danny Ainge.
I mean, that would kind of make sense, because, man, that's a scary one, man, when you have to call Danny Ainge. Like, he's that guy that you don't want to talk to. Everybody always feels like, he's going to hustle you. He's that guy that hustles you, and he has the game rigged against you. That's what GMs think talking to him. His trust is just super low. So I couldn't see myself doing a deal with him either. But them sending him out west is actually a good idea, because if you look at it now, all of the talent is in the Western Conference. Other than LeBron, the last guy to win MVP in the Eastern Conference was Derrick Rose. Like, just put that into perspective. Like, the individual talent mainly is on the Western Conference. You got Lillard, and you got the Warriors, of course. You got now Westbrook and the Thunder about to be crazy. Like,
the Rockets now.
The talent, even though exactly the Rockets, and then you got Paul Millsap might leave the East as well. Like, all of the talent is going out west. So that part doesn't, that doesn't surprise me too much. It actually makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably the Pacers, if I'm them, I don't know if I do this trade. I try to find a trade with a draft pick, because I don't know. But I guess some reports have it that, they have strong ties to Victor Oladipo, because I think he played at Indiana. So they're kind of hoping with that. And it's kind of like a quicker rebuild. These guys aren't fully developed yet. They probably had more to add, more so Sabonis than Oladipo. So, maybe they're hoping that they can kind of keep it from being a complete rebuild and kind of almost like a quick start to that, that session.
I'm not a fan of the quick rebuild, though. I feel like that's what Chicago tried when they tried that signing D Wade and Rondo, and it's like you're really stunting your growth. Like, just get the picks you can and then draft really well and develop the talent that you have and keep growing that way. Like, I hate when the Lakers do it every summer. They're trying to get some big name free agent and making posters and like, stop it. Let's just develop the talent we have, keep drafting well, and then maybe one of those stars will come. But I don't think that should be like your main goal every summer, to sign somebody big.
Yeah, I think, when you look at it from like an NBA perspective in the front office, you have to think to yourself, like, is this team going to allow me the flexibility to build a contender? And I think that's like a lot of problem that teams face. They build this great team and, they're a top 5 team in the league, but they still can't compete with, 1 and 2. Look at a team like the Clippers in the past, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Chris Paul. They have all these guys, but they have no cap flexibility, so they can't get those role players that make you win championships.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at it, it's just the best front offices are over in the Western Conference, man. Like in the East, they just don't seem to have too good a culture. I think the worst front office, like the most dysfunctional in the West, would probably be the Kings, and even they had a great draft.
Yeah, they're starting to
Like,
really turn things around.
yeah, and then you look over in the East, you see New York. They're just still messing things up. Now they want to sign Isaiah Thomas to be their GM, but it's just too much turmoil over there in the East. So I'm not really upset with players wanting to go out West.
Yeah, it's a lot of competition out there. Moving on to another move in the West, and this was another trade we saw yesterday. This happened before July 1st, which was important because the Jazz had extra cap space, and they took advantage of that. They traded a first-round pick to the T-Wolves for Ricky Rubio. What are your thoughts on this trade?
I think that's a good move, because they wanted to get rid of Rubio because in today's NBA, you need a guard who can score and still pass the ball and distribute. You look at the best guards, Westbrook, Curry, Kyrie, like all of these guys John Wall, all these guys can score and pass the ball. Like you need guys that are really versatile in that position. I mean, if you don't have that guard that can, do both of those things, it's really hard for your team to be successful. So I think Rubio, his shooting efficiency was so bad, they had to get rid of him because we saw the Timberwolves lose so many games late in the fourth quarter because of bad execution, and teams just would stop guarding Rubio. I remember how they used to guard Rondo 4 years ago, and they would just step back and just let him do whatever. They did the same thing. Yeah, you can pass, but you not scoring, you not being a true threat, it really makes your team a lot worse. So I'm not mad at them getting rid of Rubio and getting something back. I think they got the most as they could. So great move by Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm definitely under the impression that you can't be a starting guard in this league and not be able to shoot anymore. Athletes are just too fast. The closeouts are too fast. You're not going to, help your team enough with spacing. So players like Ricky Rubio, Rajon Rondo, it's harder for them to be effective when they can't shoot the three ball when it's so important in nowadays game. So I thought, especially with the fit, adding Jimmy Butler to the Timberwolves, Andrew Wiggins there already, they wanted to get a point guard that could really shoot. And that'll kind of move us to our next point, and that's Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague was the only guy so far that signed with another team, and he signed with the Timberwolves on a 3-year, $57 million deal.
I think this was a good move. I like it because it's not like you're taking a huge step up from Rubio, but we can all agree Teague can score better than Rubio. And
I think Teague's just a better fit. Rubio, they're probably like around the same caliber of player, but Teague, I think, is just such a better fit with Minnesota.
Exactly. He has a little more athleticism. Like I said, he can shoot a little better. He can still pass the ball. Defensively, he might still be a liability at times, but I mean, Teague is as good as you're going to get. The point guard market wasn't that huge. What are you going to do? Go get Kyle Lowry? He's way too expensive. They overpaid a little bit for Teague, but I mean, that's kind of like the going rate for point guards these days.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a pretty good deal for them. And like you said, the passing of Teague is kind of underrated. Yes, last year he had a career high in assists at 7.8. He kind of improved in that area. Like you mentioned, he's a better shooter than Rubio, and that's very important. And this Timberwolves team is looking pretty good right now with, Jeff Teague, Andrew Wiggins, Jimmy Butler, Karl Anthony Towns. Now there's possible talk about them having a meeting with Paul Millsap.
Oh, man. See, and that's the guy who I think that all the teams should be chasing right now because, I mean, Millsap is like a better Blake Griffin because he can score on multiple levels on the floor. And he's tough enough to play defense on the inside, and he can close out to other stretch fours and, big guys in the league that want to shoot those long-range shots. I mean, you need a guy like Millsap right now. So if they can add him, I mean, they might have to move a few other players. Gorgie Jang maybe might have to go. But if they can add Millsap, I mean, Minnesota's going in the right direction.
Yeah, there was talk about them maybe moving Cole Aldridge's contract for like a first-round pick or something, sending it with a first-round pick to open up space for Millsap. Like you said, I love Millsap's game, and his versatility just makes him such a great complementary player to any team. He can fit into so many different situations and be effective. And defensively, he's one of the best players in the league, and he's just going to improve your overall team defense. And, Tibbs loves that. And if they add him, that just really makes them a great team. If they can find a way to get some solid pieces on the bench, they can really start to, get themselves headed up to the top of the West.
Right. And this is the thing. I was just telling somebody this on Twitter is, of course, they know they aren't going to win next year or maybe the year after. But with the talent, the young talent they have now, that core, now they're just building on it. Even if they don't win, they can still learn and get better and progress. You don't want to be stuck in the mediocre, the middle of the road in the NBA. You want to either be tanking and terrible so you can get a high pick, or at least fighting for some type of relevancy. We all know they probably aren't going to beat the Warriors, Spurs, or the Rockets, but Minnesota is at least going in the right direction, and I think that's very important.
Yeah, and then you think about, like you mentioned, the potential they have. A player like Karl Anthony Towns, who has MVP type potential, he obviously hasn't hit his ceiling yet. And even you could probably say the same thing about Andrew Wiggins. He still has room to improve too. And then adding, veterans like a Jimmy Butler, a Paul Millsap, possibly, just adds to, their skill level, their talent level, and their basketball IQ. And just playing smart basketball against teams like the Warriors and Spurs is very important.
Exactly. You have to play IQ basketball, really communicate on defense and the small detail things. And it'll be great to see Minnesota get better and improve as a team overall over the next few seasons because, they need to develop that on-court awareness, defensive awareness, communication, and Karl Anthony Towns is only going to get better. Wiggins will only get better. Like, this is a great move for them. They're improving.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I was excited to watch them last year. I'm even more excited to watch them this year. We're going to touch on some of the re-signings, then we'll talk about the guys who haven't signed yet. But first, big re-signing, really, Blake Griffin, 5 years, $173 million. The Clippers locked him up after trading away Chris Paul.
I'm really kind of shocked by this move, but it'll be interesting to see what Blake can do by himself. There were constant rumors and reports that Blake didn't like Chris Paul because he dribbled too much and Blake wanted to dribble more. I don't know why he would want to dribble. Like, why? Why do you need to? He's throwing you a lob every possession. He makes you look great. Chris Paul is like the perfect guard to play with. He's going to feed you the ball whenever. He don't care if he had 5 points and get 30 assists. He just wants to try to win and feed his teammates. Chris Paul is literally the last distributing first, score second point guard in the league and the best at it. So it was kind of strange to see Blake want him to go, but Blake got his money. I think he was a little overpaid, seeing as how he has so many injuries, and he just doesn't produce enough for me to say, "Oh, you're a max guy." But
well, you mentioned the injuries. Blake hasn't played over 70 games in 3 years. So that's a big concern. I think, going to this, I think this had a lot to do with the Clippers culture. We know the Clippers have been a bad team for a long time. They got Chris Paul, they got Blake Griffin. Things started to turn around. Steve Ballmer just bought the team for, I think, $2 billion. So I saw people mention, he didn't want to go to a rebuild. He wants to stay relevant and kind of keep the Clippers somewhat competitive. I mean, they did, Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams aren't bad players. Sam Decker's not a bad player either. Montrezl Harrell's not a bad player either. So, they add some pieces. I don't think they're going to be a top team in the West. But this at least allows them to be competitive, maybe add another guy in free agency and compete for a lower seed in the West. But Blake, what do you think he's going to do as the main guy in LA? Is he going to be better? Is he going to be worse? Or what do you expect to see change in his game?
See, and people keep pointing me back to the stats when Chris Paul didn't play, when he was out with injury and Blake was playing. And Blake had some good numbers, yeah. But it's different knowing that guy isn't coming back at all. And then losing him like permanently, it really takes away from what Blake was really comfortable doing the most. What do we know them for? Lob City. Losing that, it takes away a lot. It takes away a whole lot from what Blake does, and he doesn't have any footwork in the post. He doesn't have a jumper, so he can't really step outside and shoot with consistency. So I'm really interested to see what Doc Rivers will draw up, because now Blake and DeAndre will be crowding the paint together, and they don't really have that legendary point guard to pass them both the ball.
Yeah, they really need another playmaker now.
Right? And I'm sorry, Austin Rivers will not do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think, they have some interest in somebody like Joe Ingles. He's a guy who's not only a great three-point shooter, but he's somebody who can pass the ball. And you don't necessarily need your point guard to be your passer, but you definitely need playmaking in that lineup. Because, I mean, if you look at them now, Patrick Beverley's not really a playmaker. Lou Williams really creates for himself more so. So Blake's really the guy you're looking at. They're going to need to add somebody that can help, facilitate the offense. The one positive, I guess, I look at from like the Blake perspective, and there's one postseason that like made me believe that Blake could be a great player, but that happened before the injuries, and that was the 2014-2015 postseason. I think he was averaging like 25 and 12, over 5 assists, like a steal, a block, and it was over 50% shooting, and he looked like one of the best players in the league. We haven't seen him do that since then, but that's the level that I think he can get to, but it really depends on his health, and there's reports that he might not even be ready till December.
Yeah, exactly. And see, that's my issue, the injuries. And then it's the type of injuries as well. So many knee and foot injuries and just all this stuff that's happening with his lower body.
Yeah.
It's worse even for a guy like Blake because he really relies and depends on the athleticism. You know, if you don't have footwork and you can't shoot a jumper, the only thing you can do is jump over people. So once they take that away, it's just I don't see how you can really be productive. And then you take away the point guard who really helped him show off that athleticism and do what he did on the court. I don't see it, man. I really just don't see it happening for him.
Yeah, I mean, they're just banking hopefully that he can get healthy. I mean, he showed improvements in his game. It's just more about being more consistent. Like he's improved as a shooter, but it's not consistent. He's improved in the post, but it's not consistent. So I think, they're going to look for Blake to really improve. And like you mentioned, the injuries, he's going to have to work on kind of a below the basket game a little bit, not just above the basket, because, when your knees shot, your feet are shot, your toes are shot, you're going to have a hard time jumping.
A hard time, man.
So moving on to another deal. This deal actually was reportedly happened, and then it got turned back, and that was Nene re-signing with Houston. I guess it was originally a 4-year, $50 million deal, but due to a rule in the CBA, they weren't allowed to do it for 4 years at that price. They rescinded the offer, and now Nene is back on the market. Is this a surprise to you, or?
It's not a surprise. That part is kind of surprising that they messed up the deal like that. But
especially Daryl Morey, like they just did a lot of really smart stuff in terms of like scheming around the CBA to trade for Chris Paul, and then they make an error like that. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's kind of shocking that he messed up on something like that, but not shocking that they would want to re-sign Nene. He's definitely a quality guy. He had a good season to me. He played his role well, especially in the playoffs. He was there. He consistently contributed. He did what he could to help the team win. You can't expect more from a guy like Nene.
And I mean, he's a big reason they lost to the Spurs in the second round. They didn't have the inside presence. He was huge off the bench. He was more consistent than Capella was, and he just kind of gave him that veteran presence. And he seemed like he always hit a basket when they needed it. So it'll be interesting to see if Houston's able to get him back later in free agency or if he signs with another team, because he's a solid vet to bring off the bench, especially in the postseason.
Exactly. I don't see him signing anywhere else. I think he really wants to stay in Houston. Especially, I mean, come on, they just added Chris Paul. That's even more lobs. He ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, and he said he really enjoyed it, and it made him feel young. And he definitely looked a lot more spry in Houston than he has looked in the last few seasons. But moving on to another guy, this is the biggest deal in NBA history, if I'm not mistaken. That's Steph Curry re-signing for 5 years, $201 million, an average of about a little bit over $40 million a year.
Yeah, man. Steph Curry is shimmying to the bank right now. He deserves every penny of that. We know how he's really transcended the league, being one of the most dominant players. Even due to his size, he still dominates. You can't really expect more from Steph Curry. He plays his role, man, leads the team. Even with Kevin Durant coming, you see he still was just so vital to what the Warriors did, man. Because Durant is a great player, but I don't think that team is as good without Curry playing his role. Because when Curry isn't hot, it's really it takes away because he's that guard he can bring the ball up the court and shoot it from damn near half court, and you have to guard him nonstop and be in his shirt all game, and that just takes away so many great players when you play even teams in the West. Like Damian Lillard has to lock in on defense, which drains him offensively. Westbrook has to lock in defensively. When they play the Cavs, Kyrie Irving has to lock in more defensively. So he requires so much for the other team to do. You can't really underestimate, man, what Curry brings to the team. So he deserved every penny of that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think Curry probably, like you said, is kind of underestimated and undervalued. A lot of people underrate Curry in the sense that they think that all he can do is, he's a great scorer and a great shooter, but he does a lot of other things great. He's a person that constantly improves his game, and he's a smart basketball player. And like you said, he's kind of the mojo of the Warriors. He kind of gives them that extra juice, that extra splash, that little bit of swag.
Right, and I won't say Curry is an amazing defender, but he's smart.
Exactly.
He's smart enough to get in the right position. Even though he's not some big guy, he's still smart enough to get in the right position to get steals. And that's why he's the top of the steal category every year, because he's smart enough to be in the right position. And really, that's what matters the most when you're a guy his size.
Yeah, and Corey and I talked about this on one of the NBA Finals podcasts. I don't know if you recall this play, but he risked it all on defense where he went for a fast break steal on LeBron James, and he easily could have been posterized, but he got in there just in time, poked the ball out, got a nice steal, and I think it ended up being a Warriors 3 on the other end. So it's those smart plays that kind of change the game.
That was iconic to me because You rarely see players go for that. Most of the time they stop and they're scared of getting dunked on, but Curry was smart enough to go and, take that. And, if LeBron gets that dunk, that's a huge momentum play for the Cavs. But when you get a steal, that really drains them. And when you drain the other team, that should be the goal. Get them to call a timeout and go to the bench just salty, and Curry did that with that steal.
Exactly. And it's those, those 4 point, those 5 point swings that really change games. It's that easy layup that you miss and the other team turned into a three that really kills you when it turns to be like a couple possessions at the end of the game. But another point guard that got re-signed to a good team, and that's Patty Mills. And I thought this was a nice deal for the Spurs. 4 years, $50 million.
That's perfect, man. Patty Mills is one of my favorite players in the league simply because he knows his role and he sticks to it. Like, you never see Patty Mills play out of his game. When they bring him off the bench, he's a high-energy guy. He can hit shots. He plays defense. He plays within the system. Like, you can't expect anything more from him. Like, Patty Mills is a perfect backup point guard for right now. Like, perfect.
Were you surprised that Mills didn't test the market? Because there was a lot of talk about him probably getting a bigger offer than the one he received from the Spurs.
No, I think this is why he's a Spurs guy, because he doesn't want more money. He just wants to win and be in a good environment and really, have the opportunity to produce. And he knows Pop. Of course, he's been there for years now. He won a ring with them, vital piece of that. So I think he just wants to be there to go again. He wants to go on that run again. So I knew he was going to re-sign there. I don't see him going anywhere else.
Well, we'll talk about another point guard that resigned, a backup point guard that returned at a good rate on a good team, and I think that's something to do with it. Like you mentioned, you play for a team that wins 50-plus games multiple years in a row. The Spurs have done it for like 10-plus. You're not going to want to leave in the organization. Everything just seems so great, and what are you going to sign with a bad team, not make the playoffs, and really struggle and deal with a lot of adversity? You're on the Spurs. There's a good chance they'll win, 50, 60 games next season.
Right? You got to stick with the Spurs, man. I feel like every player should want to play in an organization like that. There are very few organizations in sports that are run with, just such class and efficiency. Like if you take another team I like to compare them to is football, but the New England Patriots. They run this system consistently, where it's just greatness every year. You know what to expect from them. And I don't see how you don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's very true. So, but moving on to another point guard that re-signed for a good deal for his team, and that's Sean Livingston. 3 years, $24 million. A lot of people were surprised by this deal. Livingston, I think he knows he left money on the table, but he did say, you can't put a price on happiness.
Hey, I respect him for that. Again, man, I think the Warriors are now creating that culture. It's like their fourth or fifth year now, having that kind of like the Spurs culture where it's about winning and let's be the best team. Let's play together, share the ball. And their goals are different. The guys on their team aren't really worried about getting the biggest paycheck. They want to win and get money. If you're getting paid $40-50 million, you can still live comfortably no matter where you are. Like, that's more than
If you're
enough
getting
money
paid,
to
$5 million, I think you can still live comfortably,
Right? So he just knows that he wants to be in a winning environment. He's with a good team. I didn't expect him to leave either. Because the Warriors just, and again, they're creating a place where it's just so lovely to be there. You're going to win and be in a good environment.
It just looks like it's a lot of fun to play for the Warriors. Practice even looks fun. They do like shooting contests after practice. Obviously, they work hard and get their job done, but it just looks like they're always having fun. They enjoy each other's presence. And a lot of teams would not have been able to bounce back from a 3-1 loss in the finals where they blew that lead. They obviously got Kevin Durant. That helped. But to still have that same swag, that same confidence says a lot about the team to come back and, have a great season, then take care of business in the finals.
I really respect them for that, because we all heard the jokes nonstop all year. Oh my God, it got so annoying.
It was honestly getting annoying.
I'm so glad they won. Like, that's one of my main reasons I'm happy they won, because we don't have to hear those jokes anymore. Like, because those were getting just overdone. It was overdone.
It seemed like every number that was posted about anything ended up being 3-1 somehow. But moving on to Tony Snell re-signing with the Bucks. Another solid signing. I think Snell, 4 years, $46 million. This is a guy that was on Chicago, got traded to Milwaukee last year. He improved a lot, was a starting player on a playoff team, and I think this is a smart move by the Bucks.
Smart move, man. You got to keep those guys that are wing players that can, play defense. And, he can still hit some long shots too. So I think that's really good to have a guy that can do all of those things for you. How rare is it that we find guys that can defend that wing area. It's very, very rare. And hit a three occasionally. Yeah, you got to keep him. And they got him at a good price. They didn't overpay. So I think this was a great move by the Bucks.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And they were smart because Snell was a restricted free agent. There was some worry that teams like Brooklyn or Philly would kind of swoop in and offer him a bigger deal. But, they got him at a good price. And like you said, he's a two-way player. And he fits the Bucks criteria. They're always looking for those long, lanky, athletic wings, and he's definitely one of those guys.
Right, and it's so, again, man, it's so rare. It's so rare to have those guys that are athletic and just can contribute on both sides of the floor. I'm not saying he's a superstar like Jimmy Butler, but he's going to play D, really long defender, and he hits those open jumpers.
Exactly. Another solid re-signing was Christian Felicio for the Bulls. International big man. He improved last year. He had some nice combinations with D Wade on the pick and roll, a guy that can really roll to the rim. He has some size in the paint. 4 years, $32 million. Not a bad deal. He's a younger player, so the Bulls keep him and kind of move forward with that.
Yeah, I'm not mad at the Bulls re-signing Felicio. I have other issues with the Bulls because of their other offseason moves that were just bonehead. But signing Felicio was good. That's good. Hopefully now they can 100% commit to the rebuild.
Exactly. So, and then another big deal that got re-signed today is Drew Holiday, 5 years, $126 million. Big deal for Holiday. I think the Pelicans were kind of in a position where they couldn't let him go after trading for DeMarcus Cousins. They needed to make sure he stayed. And I know Holiday was pretty happy with the Pelicans because they were so good to him when his wife was dealing with issues early in the season.
Yeah, I know. I really respect him for, reaching out and signing him back to that deal. But I think it was a little too much money because of his injury issues. Like, he's only played one full season out of it, I think 7 or 8 years. So that right there, I just have a problem paying guys that don't really have it there as far as health. If you haven't been on the floor for at least 3 full seasons, I'm not giving you a max contract. I just think that's difficult to do. But this is great for them because you need a guy like, Drew Holiday to feed Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins. You have to have that point guard that can pass the ball and score when he needs to. So I think Holiday is like the perfect guy for this position.
Yeah, and I think with the Cousins trade they made, and Cousins being a free agent next season, I think they needed to get Holiday because they needed to make sure they had players in house so they could compete for a playoff spot next year. Hypothetically, they lose Holiday and they're not able to land another good point guard. They'd be pretty screwed. So right. I think this is kind of like the safest thing they could do, and then you don't have to worry about that. And then you lose Cousins. Maybe then they lose Cousins next year, and they just wasted the Buddy Hield pick and the first round pick from this year, and then that would all be terrible. But that didn't happen. They re-signed Holiday, and actually reports say DeMarcus Cousins has been recruiting players to play for the Pelicans.
See, and that's a good sign. That is a good sign. You want your star guy to be recruiting other guys, not looking to be recruited. You want him to be looking to be the one sought after. So I think that's good. That's a very good sign for them. You would hate for him to be looking to be on his way out and be one of those guys, because that free agency list next season is going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. It's even like this year's already been pretty crazy because what did we have? We had Jimmy Butler, Chris Paul, Brook Lopez, D'Angelo Russell, Paul George, Ricky Rubio, the number one pick all traded in the last 2 weeks. When have we ever seen this happen? Never. So next year is probably just going to be just as wild.
Yeah, it's going to be wild, man. We had some good moves so far, but next season, there's so many more big names. It'll just – I don't know how we're going to handle it. We need another Woj.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And then the last re-signing that's been reported so far, David West says he's planning to re-sign with the Warriors, and this would be his last season. So West was a nice fit with them, gave him that toughness, and that, he had that little scruffle with Tristan Thompson in the finals. I'm good with this signing. What about you?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I think you need a guy like David West. You need a bully on your team. You already got Draymond. Having David West is like having that extra muscle. Like when you talk about the mob, they got guys that are just muscle. And you need guys like David West who they're a bully.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to come through and try to punk your team because they know David West is there. And guys can talk all they want to on Twitter how they would respond to David West, but he's not a guy you want issues with.
I'll tell you this. I've watched, a good chunk of KG in his career, and, he's willing to talk shit to almost any player on the court, start with anything. I mean, I saw him try to throw the ball at Dwight Howard and smack him in the face. In David West one game, he was about to do something to him. When he realized it was David West, he turned around. That just tells you that nobody is messing with David West if KG's not.
Yeah, exactly. Because you need that, and then a guy like Draymond, him being there too, is just you need the bullies. I think that's a lot of teams' problem that they don't have that bully guy, and it's such a vital piece.
Especially when your best player is a little bit on the smaller side in Steph Curry. So you have somebody that can kind of lay down the law for him on the other end. So it kind of balances out. But talking about a few guys that haven't signed, this has been the hot names around the market. Gordon Hayward. Obviously there's been the talk about Boston getting him with a connection with Brad Stevens. Obviously Miami Heat has a meeting with him and Pat Riley, and I think they put a banner up of Hayward in a Heat jersey. And then we have the Jazz who say they're confident to re-sign, and they just made the move for Rubio. So where do you think you see Hayward landing this free agency? I know we talked about it on the free agency pod. Has your mind changed, or where do you see him heading?
I don't know. Now that Boston has drafted Tatum, it'll be hard for them to, add him there. But it would be smart, to be smart if they sign Hayward. But I don't see how Utah is so confident when he still has meetings. Like Blake Griffin canceled his meetings and just went ahead and re-signed. If your guy isn't doing that, you should not be confident at all. The opportunity is still there for him to walk out the door. Remember what happened with Shaq and the Orlando Magic. So I don't know, man. I think it's really just it's out there, man. We really don't know where Hayward will sign. We haven't heard any signs. He still has meetings with all these different teams, and where he goes really dictates what happens in the East. Because if he goes to Boston, the Celtics are now threatening the Cavs a lot more. And like we said, the East is just gutted out right now. So if he stays there in the Eastern Conference, it's easy, man. If he goes there to the Eastern Conference, it's easy to see the Celtics moving up the ladder a lot, and maybe even knocking the Cavs off because there won't be any other competition there. But I don't see how Utah is just so comfortable right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a interesting situation. I mean, I guess Utah feels comfortable. They feel comfortable because I think they see Boston maybe as the biggest threat. And, the talk is Brad Stevens has a great relationship with Gordon Hayward. But Quinn Snyder's coached Hayward longer. They've mentioned this a lot. He's coached him for 3 years. Stevens only 2 years. He seemed to like what they're doing in Utah. Obviously, then you have the dark horse in Miami. Pat Riley's been great at recruiting players. They have all those rings. They have Spoelstra, who's gotten the best out of guys. We didn't even expect to see, Deion Waiters, James Johnson, even Hassan Whiteside to an extent. He's got the best out of those guys. So it's really tough to see Hayward. Part of me, I like the argument that you made about the East. Like, do I want to go back West? There's no guarantee that the Jazz will even grab a top 4 playoff spot. So if I go East, even if I go to Miami, there's a chance that I'm going to grab a top 4 playoff spot just because the East is so gutted, like you mentioned. Who do you have right now that's a lock to be great? You have the Cavs, you have the Celtics, and then Toronto's still up in the air. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. And then you have Washington. There's other teams around there, but no one who's like, wow, they're super scary. So Miami signs Hayward, re-signs some of their guys, and, another season together and maybe add a bench piece or two. They could really be up there as well. So I think Hayward probably wants to come to the East, and I'd like to see him stay with the Jazz. I know they're confident in re-signing him, but I think you're right about the East point.
Yeah, man. If he goes to Miami or Boston, he's in the playoffs, top 4 seed maybe. I don't see how you don't make that move as a young player. And they're going to sign you, give you all the money you want. So,
and they're going to always try to compete. And Pat Riley's always going to try to scheme things where they're going to add another big player. So, I mean, there's a chance that they can make another move after signing Hayward. I think the one thing that hurt Boston is Hayward and Paul George, I think, wanted to play together. So if they were able to land Paul George or at least have that agreement ready to go, it would have made it easier to get Hayward, and I think that would have been more of a lock. But now since George is not an option and, things are kind of all messed up and the East is looking a lot weaker, could really, switch Hayward's mind up.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. It'll really the balance is just shifting a lot in the NBA right now. So hey, it'll be wherever he goes, the ball is in his court. He can go wherever he wants to.
But before we talk about something else, I want to ask you, if the Celtics do not sign Gordon Hayward, what do they do this free agency? Are they screwed? Is this like a bust type of offseason for them, or it doesn't really matter because they still got the picks, they still got the young guys? Who cares?
I mean, at some point, you got to get rid of the assets, right? Like, at what point do you want to really improve your team and start contending? I feel like the time is now. even if you don't necessarily win the finals, you can at least get there and get past LeBron and the Cavs by adding that small forward you desperately need. I'm not saying it's a lock to happen, but it's obvious that's what they need. Jay Crowder just isn't enough at that small forward spot. So you need to add a guy. And keeping the assets, I mean, assets are only assets, man. The picks, I'm tired of hearing about them. Like at some point, you got to improve the team. You have to improve the team at some point.
Yeah, I think, at one point they're going to have to. I think this year and the following year, they're going to have to start to make a decision on moving the thing because they're just going to have so many picks and they're not going to have the roster spots for the picks. It's not like you're going to draft a ton of international guys and just stash them. So I think, they need to either turn the picks into higher picks, turn them into all big, number 1 or top 5 pick type of stuff and move them around like in that way. Or, like you said, trade for a bigger player and kind of get more competitive because they still have the potential, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, to have like a Sixers type talent, pot from like the draft and still compete in the East at the same time as a top spot. Because you look at them this year, last year they drafted Jaylen Brown. This year they get Jason Tatum. Next year they could end up with another high pick from the Lakers. So, I mean, there's another chance that they could end up with another top 5 pick, and then they could even still trade some of their other picks, get, a star player or sign Hayward, be a top 3 seed in the East, and then have a top pick next year and then just kind of build a dynasty moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. You have to start building, not just stashing assets. Build, get good players, get good young players. I think Tatum was a good piece. That's a good addition. But now like I said, man, you need to get somebody else and keep it going. Finish this thing off. You're right there now. You're right there.
Let's talk about a guy I know you like him, and that's Paul Millsap. Where do you see Millsap landing this free agency? I know there's been a lot of talk across the board: Timberwolves, Suns, Nuggets, Rockets. It seems like a ton of teams. There's probably even more teams than I mentioned there that have interest in Millsap. Do you think Millsap's going to be looking for the big payday, being a little bit older, or he's going to be looking for the winning opportunity?
I think he's going to look for the winning opportunity because he's still going to get paid something wherever he goes. I've been hearing a lot about the Spurs' interest. I think it'd be smart for the Spurs or the Timberwolves to sign him. If you can get Gorgie Jang out of there, but then add Paul Millsap to play next to Karl Anthony Towns, that's just so much versatility. And it's not like Blake and DeAndre where they'll be crowding the paint. Both of these guys can shoot. Like they can run pick and pop together. That's how good Millsap and Karl Anthony Towns dribble. Like that's insane versatility. And then you're talking about a real improvement there and maybe a contender in a year or two. You add Millsap, some veteran presence, and a guy that can really contribute offensively and defensively. I mean, that just says a lot for your team, man. If they can somehow get Millsap, that'll be perfect for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
I mean, the Timberwolves would pretty much kind of be a super team in a sense. They
right?
have Jeff Teague. He's been an all-star before. Millsap's been an all-star before. Jimmy Butler obviously is an all-star, and he's one of the best two-way players in the NBA. Karl Anthony Towns is on his way to be one of the best players in the NBA. Andrew Wiggins is going to be probably a top 5, wing player in the next few years. So, this team is just so stacked, and then they have a great coach like Tibbs. Long as, they can get a few bench pieces. That's my only concern with this team. They need to add some bench pieces to kind of stabilize things.
Exactly. You got to get those bench guys. You have to get those role players that know their role and that are comfortable sticking with it, like a guy like Patty Mills, Iguodala. Like it's hard to find role players that accept the role and are good at contributing there. Like, that's very, very hard. So I think that's something Minnesota should be looking for now.
Exactly. Moving on to probably this will be the last two guys we really talked about, and that's about the Raptors. Serge Ibaka, Kyle Lowry, both free agents. There's been a lot of talk about the Raptors not sure in which direction they're looking to go, if they want to re-sign these guys or if they want to enter a rebuild and maybe try to get younger.
I think, the Raptors have to really decide what it is that they want to do. Because do you want to keep paying Kyle Lowry, even though he doesn't, commit and really give you what you need when it matters. Like Kyle Lowry disappears way too much when it counts. And he's done it consistently, not just 1 year. It's been like 3-4 years now where he just disappears in the playoffs. So I think that's a red flag for me. Ibaka, I think you sign him. And another guy that's a free agent on their roster, PJ Tucker. I think you got to keep him around too. He was good at playing his role and contributing. Of course you don't pay him ridiculous money, but you still got to pay PJ Tucker and keep him on your roster.
Yeah, PJ Tucker's been a popular name though around the board. He's a guy that, he's not going to get a big contract. So a lot of championship teams have been interested in him. The Cavs have been mentioned. The Rockets have been mentioned with him. So the whole Toronto thing is just something that's going to have to wait and see. I think the Lowry situation going into the offseason, it was kind of worrisome that a lot of teams would kind of go after him. But the way, we've seen so many trades, the Sixers getting the number 1 pick drafting Fultz, the Nets getting D'Angelo Russell, Ricky Rubio trade, and Jeff Teague signing with the Timberwolves, it kind of killed his market. So it makes things a little bit easier for the Raptors and gives them a little bit more leverage, because there was some talk maybe earlier that they would have had to throw in big money at long-term number to Lowry, and they really didn't want to do that. Now they maybe can kind of get the years down to a number that they want.
Yeah, I think so too, because the point guard market is it's drying up really fast. So Lowry lost all his options. He thought he was going to go to Minnesota. We heard that. We heard Spurs talk. We heard so many different places where Lowry could be going, and now he kind of has to settle for pretty much whatever deal they give him. Like, he doesn't have too many other options, so he lost all of his leverage.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, the Spurs did re-sign Patty Mills, but maybe they could still go after a point guard, so maybe that's an option. Same thing with George Hill is still out there. We didn't really talk about him, but we'll be back on, the next few days. Ton of podcasts. Chris, thanks for hopping on. Enjoy free agency, and thanks everybody for listening. And head to OTG. We got all the free agent signings in one place for you.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on.